The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, ominous shadows across the barren landscape. Skinwalker Ranch. A place whispered about in hushed tones, a breeding ground for fear and the unknown. Dust devils danced in the distance, their swirling forms mimicking the unease creeping into my gut. This place had a vibe, a palpable sense of something sinister lurking beneath the surface. I could feel the sweat trickling down my spine, a mix of anticipation and dread clinging to me like a second skin. The air, thick with the smell of sagebrush and danger, crackled with an unseen energy. We were here, 5 friends on a quest for thrills, for a taste of the paranormal. Cameras in hand, we were ready to capture whatever lurked in the shadows. We were so naive. Laughter echoed through the dry air as we unloaded the truck, our voices a jarring contrast to the unsettling silence of the desert. We were young, invincible, or so we thought. John, our fearless leader, slapped me on the back, his grin infectious. "Ready for a night we'll never forget?" he boomed, his voice laced with excitement. I forced a smile, trying to ignore the shiver that ran down my spine. We were about to find out just how unforgettable this night would be. Our excitement was palpable, fueled by adrenaline and a healthy dose of fear. This was Skinwalker Ranch, a place steeped in legend, a hotbed of paranormal activity. We'd heard the stories, tales of strange creatures, unexplained lights, and a darkness that clung to the soul. We were here to document it all, to capture the truth behind the myths. As darkness enveloped the ranch, a hush fell over the group. The wind, which had been whipping around us earlier, died down as if holding its breath. Even the crickets, usually a constant presence in the desert night, were silent. The silence was deafening, amplifying every rustle of leaves, every crackle of static from our walkie-talkies. John's earlier enthusiasm seemed to have waned, replaced by a furrowed brow and a nervous glance over his shoulder. "Did you feel that?" he muttered, his voice barely a whisper, like we're being watched. I nodded, unable to shake the feeling that we were not alone. The desert, usually teeming with life, felt empty, devoid of everything except an oppressive sense of dread. The air grew thick with tension, each of us acutely aware of the growing unease. Our laughter died down, replaced by hushed whispers and nervous glances over our shoulders. The darkness felt heavier here, more oppressive, as if it were a living, breathing entity. We pressed on, our bravado slowly crumbling under the weight of the unseen eyes that seemed to follow our every move. Every gust of wind sent shivers down our spines. Every creak of a branch sounded like footsteps approaching in the darkness. We tried to rationalize our fear, to attribute the strange occurrences to our overactive imaginations, but deep inside, a primal instinct screamed at us to run. "This is getting creepy, even for me," Mark muttered, his voice tight with apprehension. Mark, our resident skeptic, was usually the first to dismiss anything paranormal. His unease only served to amplify our own. We were supposed to be documenting the paranormal, not becoming victims of it. The silence, once unnerving, was now broken by a series of unsettling sounds. Faint whispers seemed to emanate from the darkness beyond our flashlight's reach, whispers in languages we couldn't understand. They swirled around us, taunting us, mocking our fear. We spun around, trying to pinpoint the source, but the whispers seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Who's there?" John called out, his voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in his hand that betrayed his fear. The only response was the rustling of leaves and the echo of his own voice swallowed by the vastness of the desert. Our eyes darted around frantically, searching for any sign of movement, any indication that we weren't alone. The whispers grew louder, closer, morphing into guttural growls that sent chills down our spines. We huddled closer, our flashlights forming a trembling circle of light against the encroaching darkness. Fear, raw and primal, tightened its grip on our chest, making it difficult to breathe. As if the whispers weren't enough, the desert around us came alive with unexplained phenomena. Strange lights danced on the horizon, flickering in and out of existence like ghostly apparitions. They pulsed with an eerie green glow, casting grotesque shadows that stretched and contorted, appearing to writhe with their own sinister life. The temperature plummeted, a sudden, bone-chilling cold that cut through our jackets and sent goosebumps erupting across our skin. Our breath appeared in ragged puffs of white, dissipating into the darkness like spectral sighs. The air itself felt charged, electric, as if a storm was brewing just beyond our perception. "This is insane," Emily whimpered, her voice trembling. "We need to get out of here." Her words were met with nods of agreement. Our initial excitement had evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard terror that settled deep in our guts. We were in over our heads, and we all knew it. As if sensing our fear, our equipment chose that moment to malfunction. The walkie-talkies crackled one last time before falling silent. John fiddled with the dials, but only dead air responded. We were cut off, isolated, alone in the darkness. The cameras began to flicker erratically. Distorted images, twisted figures lurked beyond the lens. Were they real or tricks of the light? We couldn't be sure, and that gnawed at our sanity. "What the hell is going on?" Mike stammered. He fumbled with his camera, trying to steady the footage. The batteries drained rapidly, flashing warnings. We were stranded, trapped in a nightmare. And then it happened. A blood-curdling scream, raw and filled with unimaginable terror, shattered the night. It ripped through the silence, echoing off the canyons, bouncing around us like a malevolent entity. The sound seemed to claw at our eardrums, digging its way into our very souls. We froze, our blood turning to ice in our veins. The scream was followed by an eerie silence, a silence even more terrifying than the screams themselves. Our hearts hammered against our ribs like trapped birds, our breath catching in our throats. The air hung heavy, thick with the stench of fear and something else, something metallic, something primal. "Emily!" John choked out, his voice hoarse with terror. "Emily, is that you?" But there was no reply, only the echo of our own ragged breathing and the frantic thumping of our hearts. The chilling realization hit us like a physical blow. Someone was gone, taken. Panic seized us. We fanned out, our flashlights cutting through the darkness, searching desperately for any sign of our missing friend. "Emily, Emily, answer me!" John's voice cracked with desperation, echoing through the canyons. Each rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent our hearts leaping into our throats. We stumbled over rocks and scrub brush, our fear propelling us forward, but also threatening to cripple us with terror. Where was she? What had taken her? The questions swirled in our minds, fueling our panic. We found her backpack discarded on the ground, its contents scattered around it like fallen leaves. Her camera lay a few feet away, its lens cracked. The last image it captured still displayed on the screen. A distorted, nightmarish figure with glowing red eyes. The image sent a fresh wave of terror washing over us. We were no longer dealing with something explainable. This was something else, something evil. Then in the distance, a flicker of movement. A fleeting glimpse of something unnatural, something that sent a jolt of pure terror through our veins. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, vanishing back into the shadows like a phantom. but we had seen it. A twisted, grotesque parody of a human form, its limbs contorted at unnatural angles, its eyes burning with a malevolent light. "Did you see that?" Mike whispered, his voice trembling. We all had. There was no denying it. We had just witnessed something that defied explanation, something that sent a primal fear coursing through our veins. The Skinwalkers were real, and they were hunting us. We stood there frozen in place, our minds struggling to comprehend the horror we had just witnessed. The image of that creature, its twisted limbs and glowing eyes, was seared into our brains. A cold sweat clung to my skin, and my heart pounded against my ribs like a drumbeat of doom. The silence was broken only by our ragged breaths and the distant howling of coyotes, a sound that now sent shivers down our spines. The air itself seemed to crackle with a malevolent energy, pressing down on us, suffocating us. We were prey, and something dark and ancient was hunting us. "We need to go," Mike whispered, his voice barely audible above the pounding in my ears. He was right. Standing here paralyzed by fear was suicide, but where could we go? The desert stretched out around us, an endless expanse of darkness and unknown terrors. Adrenaline surged through me, snapping me out of my stupor. Survival instinct took over, overriding the paralyzing fear. "Run!" I screamed, my voice raw with terror. And with that, we were off, crashing through the underbrush, our flashlights bouncing erratically, casting grotesque shadows that danced and writhed around us. We didn't have a plan, no destination in mind, just a desperate need to put as much distance between us and that creature as possible. We ran blindly, our lungs burning, our legs screaming for mercy, but we didn't dare slow down. The sound of our own panicked breathing filled our ears, along with the crashing of branches and the clatter of loose stones under our feet. Behind us, we could hear the creature moving, a low growl that seemed to vibrate the very ground beneath our feet. It was toying with us, herding us like sheep, savoring our fear. The thought spurred us on, fueled our desperate flight. The creature was relentless. It moved with unnatural speed and agility, bounding over obstacles, slipping through the underbrush with ease. It was always there, lurking just beyond the reach of our flashlight beams, a constant, terrifying presence. We stumbled and fell, our clothes ripped by thorns, our hands scraped raw against rocks. But we couldn't stop. To stop was to die. The creature's growls grew louder, closer, and we could hear its heavy breathing, a rasping, guttural sound that sent chills down our spines. We were outmatched, outmaneuvered. This wasn't a fair chase. It was a hunt, and we were the prey. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut, stealing my breath, leaving me with nothing but cold, hard fear. A blood-curdling scream pierced the night, stopping us in our tracks. It was John. His voice, filled with terror and pain, echoed through the canyons, sending a fresh wave of horror crashing over us. We spun around, our flashlights scanning the darkness, searching for him. "John, where are you?" Mike shouted, his voice hoarse with fear. But there was no reply, only the sound of John's screams growing fainter as he was dragged away into the darkness. We could hear the creature's growls, closer now, mixed with the sickening sounds of tearing flesh and snapping bones. Then silence, a silence more terrifying than any scream. John was gone, taken. We were too late. The creature had claimed its first victim. And then, as quickly as it had vanished, the creature reappeared. It stood on a small rise, silhouetted against the moonlit sky, its grotesque form illuminated in all its horrifying detail. but it was what it held in its hand that sent a wave of nausea through me. It was John's head. His lifeless eyes stared out at us, his face contorted in a silent scream. The creature held it aloft like a grotesque trophy, a macabre prize. And then it did something truly horrifying. It grinned. The creature's lips peeled back, revealing rows of jagged teeth stained crimson with blood. It was a mockery of a human smile, a grotesque display of triumph. The message was clear. We were next. Despair threatened to consume us. We had witnessed something truly monstrous, something that defied explanation, something that shattered our perception of reality. We were outmatched, outgunned, and utterly terrified. But somewhere, deep down, beneath the fear and despair, a spark of defiance ignited. We had lost John, but we would not let him die in vain. We would survive. We had to. We have to keep moving, Mike whispered, his voice raspy but firm. He was right. Standing here mourning John would only lead to our own deaths. We had to keep running, keep fighting for as long as we could. We owed it to John, and we owed it to ourselves. The creature's laughter, a chilling cacophony of inhuman sounds, echoed after us as we fled, our unity shattered, our survival instincts overriding any sense of loyalty or friendship. We were each alone now, adrift in a sea of darkness, hunted by something ancient and evil. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The memory of John's mangled face, the creature's grotesque grin, fueled my flight. My lungs burned, my legs screamed for mercy, but I pushed on, driven by a primal terror I'd never known. The desert stretched out before me, an endless expanse of shadows and whispers. The moon, a pale disk in the night sky, provided little comfort, casting long, distorted shadows that danced and writhed like phantoms. Every creak of a branch, every rustle of leaves sent my heart leaping into my throat, my mind conjuring images of the creature lurking just beyond my field of vision. I had no idea where I was going, no plan, no hope. The desert, once a place of stark beauty, was now a labyrinth of terror. My flashlight beam, a feeble beacon, darted back and forth, searching for signs of the creature. The silence was as unnerving as the creature's laughter. Gone were the night sounds of the desert. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. I stumbled on, my clothes torn, my body battered. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by bone-deep exhaustion. My vision blurred and I swayed on my feet. I wanted to stop, to rest, but I knew I couldn't. To stop was to surrender, to accept my fate. A low moan, barely audible above the pounding of my own heart, stopped me in my tracks. It was a sound of unimaginable pain, of utter despair. It was Mike. Cautiously I crept forward, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness until I saw it. The sight that greeted me was so horrific, so utterly inhuman, it nearly sent me to my knees. Mike's body lay sprawled on the ground, twisted at an unnatural angle, his limbs contorted in ways they were never meant to bend. His clothes were shredded, his skin flayed, revealing the raw muscle and bone beneath. His face, or what was left of it, was frozen in a silent scream, his eyes wide with terror, his mouth agape as if he had died trying to draw breath. The air reeked of blood, a coppery tang that caught in my throat, choking me. I stumbled back, my stomach churning, bile rising in my throat. I retched, dry heaves racking my body, but nothing came up. I couldn't tear my gaze away from Mike's mangled corpse. This was no animal attack. This was something else, something evil. Panic welled up inside me. I had to get out of there, but my legs felt like lead. I stumbled into a shallow ravine. I collapsed on the rocky ground. I fumbled for my flashlight. It clattered on the rocks, casting shadows on the ravine walls. I lay there, catching my breath, listening for any sound. The silence was broken by a sound that sent a fresh wave of terror through me. It was a low, guttural chuckle coming from somewhere outside the ravine. The creature was close, too close. I held my breath, my heart pounding against my ribs like a drumbeat of doom. Then a rustling sound close by, just outside the mouth of the ravine. I peered through the branches, my blood turning to ice at what I saw. The creature was standing there, its grotesque form illuminated by the moonlight. But it was what it was doing that sent a shiver down my spine. It was shedding its skin. The creature's flesh rippled and bulged, and with a sickening tearing sound, its skin began to peel away, revealing an even more grotesque form beneath. Its flesh was a sickly grey-green, covered in pulsating veins and oozing sores. Its teeth, longer and sharper than before, glinted in the moonlight. "Looking for me?" a voice called out, chillingly familiar. My blood ran cold. It was Emily's voice, but it couldn't be. Could it? I peered through the branches, my heart pounding in my chest. The creature was holding something up in its hand, something small and limp. As it moved closer, I saw with horror that it was Emily's face. Her eyes, wide and lifeless, stared out at me, her lips frozen in a silent scream. The creature had skinned her, wearing her face like a macabre mask. "We were so close," the creature whispered, its voice a grotesque parody of Emily's. "We almost made it out of here, but you had to run." The creature's laughter echoed through the ravine, a chilling sound that seemed to mock my grief, my terror, my very existence. The creature tossed Emily's face into the ravine. It landed at my feet, her lifeless eyes staring up at me accusingly. I was alone now, the last one left. The weight of my solitude crashed down on me, suffocating me. My friends were gone, butchered by this thing, and I was next. The creature's laughter followed me as I fled, echoing through the canyons, a promise of the torment to come. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs gave out, until I collapsed on the desert floor, utterly broken. But even then, I couldn't escape the chilling truth. I was alone, hunted, and there was nowhere left to run. They surrounded me, creatures of shadow and bone, their laughter echoing through the canyons, each cackle a nail in my sanity. Their forms flickered, grotesque parodies of humans, limbs contorted, eyes burning with hunger. "We've got you now," hissed a voice. It was John's voice, twisted, nowhere left to run. I whirled around, but the voice came from everywhere. "Help me," Emily's voice whispered. "Please don't leave me." The voices swirled, whispers of the damned, each one a knife twisting in my gut, a reminder of my helplessness. Their words, laced with memories, used to break my spirit. I was drowning in terror, dragged down by the ghosts of my friends. They were toying with me, these creatures, herding me like a sheep through the labyrinthine canyons, their laughter echoing across the desolate landscape. They were everywhere and nowhere, flickering in and out of view, their forms shifting, their voices mimicking the pleas and screams of my fallen friends. I ran until my lungs burned, my legs screamed for mercy, but they always stayed one step ahead, their presence a suffocating weight on my chest. The moon, a malevolent eye in the night sky, offered no comfort, casting long, distorted shadows that danced and writhed like the creatures themselves. Come out, wherever you are," a voice sang, a grotesque parody of a child's rhyme. It was Mike's voice, twisted and laced with a mocking glee that sent chills down my spine. I stumbled over a rock, my ankle twisting beneath me, a sharp pain shooting up my leg. I lay there for a moment, gasping for breath, my body screaming in protest. And then through the haze of pain and terror, I saw it. A light. A beacon of hope in the overwhelming darkness. A farmhouse nestled in the distance, its windows glowing with a warm, inviting light. Could it be real? Or was it just another cruel trick, another layer of the nightmare they were weaving around me? Desperation fueled my steps. I limped toward the light, my ankle throbbing with each step, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The closer I got, the stronger the light became, pushing back the shadows, offering a glimmer of hope in the suffocating darkness. I reached the edge of the property, a rickety fence separating me from the house. Hesitation gripped me. Something felt off. The air hung heavy, thick with the smell of damp earth and something else, and something metallic, something primal. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, a primal warning screaming at me to turn back. But it was too late. They were waiting for me. As I reached for the gate latch, a chorus of inhuman shrieks erupted from the shadows surrounding me, cutting off any chance of retreat. Their forms seemed to solidify, their features becoming clearer, more defined, their eyes burning with a malevolent glee. "Welcome home," John's voice hissed, his breath hot on my neck. I spun around, adrenaline surging through my veins, and lashed out with my foot, connecting with something solid. A satisfying crunch echoed through the night, followed by a howl of pain. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed a loose fence post, its wood rough against my palms, and swung it like a club, my fear replaced by a surge of desperate rage. They swarmed me, their claws raking at my flesh, their teeth bared in feral snarls. But I fought back with the fury of a cornered animal. I realized then, with a sickening certainty, that the farmhouse wasn't a haven. It was a trap, a lure. These creatures, they enjoyed toying with their prey, drawing them in with the promise of safety, only to snatch it away at the last moment, reveling in their terror. I was trapped. Skinwalker Ranch wasn't just a place, it was a prison, a hunting ground where these creatures reigned supreme, their power absolute, their hunger insatiable. The air crackled with an unseen energy, a malevolent force that pressed down on me, suffocating me, reminding me that I was nothing more than an insect caught in their web. They circled me, their movements predatory, their eyes glowing with a cold, calculating amusement. They were in no hurry. They knew I had nowhere to go, no hope of escape. They were going to savor this, prolong my suffering, break me before they finished me off. Exhaustion gnawed at my consciousness, my body screaming in protest, my vision blurred, breaths ragged. I was wounded but alive, barely. I gripped the fence post tighter. It was all I had left. I would make them pay for every inch, every breath. This was it, my final stand. Bring it on. I didn't think, I just ran. The fence post lay forgotten in the dirt, useless against this tide of evil. My lungs screamed for air, each breath a searing pain, but I pushed harder, fueled by a primal instinct to survive. The ground flew beneath my feet, a blur of rock and shadow, the farmhouse receding into the darkness behind me. Their laughter, a chorus of inhuman shrieks and guttural growls, echoed after me, spurring me onward. They were toying with me, savoring the chase, prolonging my terror. I could almost feel their hot breath on my neck, the stench of decay, and something else, something ancient and evil washing over me. The moon, a malevolent eye in the night sky, cast long, distorted shadows that reached out like grasping claws, tripping me, trying to drag me down. I stumbled but didn't fall, scrambling back to my feet, driven by a terror that bordered on madness. How long could I keep running? How far could I go before they caught me? The desert stretched before me, an endless expanse of darkness and despair. I had no idea where I was going, no destination in mind, just a desperate need to put as much distance between me and those things as possible. My vision blurred, my legs screamed for mercy, my body on the verge of collapse. And then, through the haze of exhaustion and terror, I saw it. Lights, headlights, a vehicle silhouetted against the horizon, its headlights cutting through the darkness like beacons of hope. Could it be real? Or just another cruel trick, another layer of the nightmare they were weaving around me? Hope, fragile and desperate, surged through me, giving me a burst of energy I didn't know I had left. I staggered towards the lights, my heart pounding in my chest, my throat raw from breathing the dry desert air. Closer now, I could hear the rumble of the engine, a sound that filled me with a sliver of hope. But as the vehicle drew closer, a sense of unease settled over me. Something wasn't right. The vehicle was moving too slowly, its headlights casting flickering shadows. The rumble of the engine morphed into a low, guttural growl. And then, the laughter. It came from inside the vehicle, a chorus of inhuman shrieks. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a rescue, it was them. They had been herding me towards this abomination. My legs turned to lead, my body refusing to obey. I wanted to run, to scream, but I was frozen in place. The laughter intensified, dragging me down into the abyss. This was it, the end. I closed my eyes, surrendering to the darkness. It was a crisp November evening, the kind that bites with a cold wind and the scent of dead leaves. I was heading towards my girlfriend's family home for Thanksgiving dinner, a ritual I was new to. The GPS announced my arrival at the destination. Each step I took up the path to the front door felt heavier than the last. A wave of cold air hit me as the door swung open and I was met with the sickly sweet aroma of incense. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease, but it was like an unwelcome guest that refused to leave. "Darling, you made it." Sarah's voice cut through the suffocating quiet. Her touch, however, was familiar and warm, a flicker of normalcy in this increasingly strange environment. The air was thick with unspoken tension, the silence broken only by the soft creak of floorboards beneath our feet. We finally reached a spacious living room dominated by a roaring fireplace that did little to dispel the gloom. The room was crammed with an eclectic collection of objects, animal skulls mounted on the walls, ancient tomes bound in leather, and strangely shaped artifacts displayed in glass cases. A low chuckle escaped her lips, the sound like dry leaves rustling in the wind. Yes, we've been expecting you," she said, her voice a raspy whisper that seemed to cling to the smoke rising from the fireplace. Above the fireplace, a large portrait dominated the wall, depicting a family from a bygone era. This house, this family, held secrets. The grandfather clock chimed 7 times, its deep, resonant tones breaking the oppressive silence. Sarah took my hand, her touch a stark contrast to the icy grip of her mother. We reached a grand dining room, the table set for a feast. The aroma, however, was not of cooked meat. Sarah's father sat at the head of the table, his face hidden in the shadows cast by a flickering candelabra. The meal began in silence, broken only by the clinking of silverware and the occasional grunt from Sarah's father. I tried to focus on my food, but the aroma, the texture, the taste, it was all wrong. The room seemed to close in on me, the air thick with unspoken tension.
I could have, I really wasn't sure.
As the dinner progressed, the conversation remained strained. Desperate for a moment of respite, I excused myself from the table, claiming the need for fresh air. Against my better judgment, I descended the stairs, each step echoing ominously in the silence. Driven by a morbid curiosity and a growing sense of dread, I slowly pushed the heavy wooden door open. The sight that greeted me sent a wave of nausea crashing over me. Standing over him, her back to me, was Sarah. For a moment our eyes met, and I saw a flicker of recognition in their depths, followed by something else entirely. Time seemed to stop. Sarah stared at me, her eyes wide, the scalpel still clutched in her blood-stained hand. Sarah. My voice was a choked whisper, barely audible in the stillness of the basement. "You weren't supposed to see this," she said, her voice cold, devoid of the warmth I knew. "Sarah, what is this?" I stammered, my voice trembling. A humorless laugh escaped her lips, a chilling sound that echoed in the confined space. This family, Sarah's family, were monsters. "Don't be afraid," she said softly, her voice a seductive purr that did nothing to calm the terror clawing at my throat. A shadow fell across the doorway, and a deep, chilling voice cut through the room. "Sarah, what's taking so long?" Sarah's father stepped into the room, his face contorted into a mask of annoyance. This was a scene from a horror film, a nightmare I would wake up from any minute now. But the smell of blood, the terror in the restrained man's eyes, the cold, calculating gleam in Sarah's gaze, it was all too real. "Sarah," I pleaded, my voice hoarse with fear. "It's too late for that," she whispered, her voice devoid of emotion. Adrenaline surged through my veins, a primal scream trapped in my throat. Sarah, her face a mask of chilling detachment, advanced, the scalpel gleaming under the flickering gaslight. "No!" The word ripped from my throat, a desperate plea lost in the suffocating confines of the basement. There had to be a way out, a way to escape this nightmare. "Sarah, please," I cried out, my voice echoing in the confined space. "You don't understand. We can still fix this." Her eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, flickered with something akin to amusement. "Fix it?" she repeated, her voice dripping with scorn. "You think this is something that can be fixed?" She took another step towards me, her shadow stretching across the floor like a living thing. But in that moment, a distraction. A low moan filled with pain came from the man on the table. He thrashed against his restraints, his eyes wide with terror as he caught my gaze. Sarah's head snapped towards the source of the noise, her attention momentarily diverted. It was a small window, a fleeting opportunity. But in this nightmare, even a sliver of hope was enough to cling to. I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline lending me a burst of strength I didn't know I possessed. My heart was pounding and my mind was racing with a singular focus: survival. Sarah, realizing my intent, whirled around, her expression a mask of fury. Her eyes burned with a rage I had never seen before. "Don't even think about it," she snarled, her voice raw with anger. The intensity in her voice sent chills down my spine, but it was too late. The decision had already been made in the depths of my mind. I was already moving, my body propelled by a primal need to escape. Every muscle in my body screamed for me to run faster. I dodged past her, my shoulder connecting with her arm, sending the scalpel clattering across the floor. The sound echoed ominously. She cried out, more in anger than pain, but I didn't look back. Her voice was a distant roar in my ears. I didn't know the layout of the house, but instinct took over. My feet seemed to find their own path through the maze of rooms. I ran blindly, my lungs burning, my heart pounding against my ribs. Each breath felt like fire in my chest. Doors flew open, revealing glimpses of opulent rooms, each one adding to the surreal, nightmarish quality of my flight. The grandeur felt mocking, but behind me, always behind me, came the sound of pursuit. The relentless footsteps were a constant reminder of the danger. Footsteps, heavy and relentless, echoing through the labyrinthine corridors. They seemed to grow louder with each passing second. I didn't dare slow down, didn't dare look back. Fear was my only companion. The only thought that consumed me was escape. Every fiber of my being was focused on getting away. Escape from this house of horrors. The walls seemed to close in on me, suffocating my resolve. Escape from the woman I loved, who was no longer the woman I knew. The realization was a dagger to my heart, but I couldn't afford to dwell on it. My lungs burned, each breath a searing pain in my chest. The blood pounding in my ears drowned out the echoes of my pursuer, but I didn't dare slow down. Not yet. Not while I could still hear the heavy thud of footsteps, each one a reminder of the horrors I was fleeing. I burst through a doorway, finding myself in a library. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, crammed with leather-bound volumes that whispered of forgotten knowledge. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows that danced across the worn Persian rug. For a fleeting moment, the normalcy of it all was disarming. Had I imagined the whole thing? The basement, the scalpel, the look in Sarah's eyes? No. The coppery tang of blood still lingered in my nostrils, a stark reminder of the reality I couldn't outrun. This haven of old books and crackling fire offered no sanctuary, only a temporary reprieve. I risked a glance back. The hallway was empty. The only sound, the frantic beating of my own heart. Silence. Had I lost them, or were they lying in wait, enjoying the chase? The thought sent a fresh wave of terror washing over me. I stumbled towards a window, its glass frosted with age. Moonlight filtered through the grime, illuminating dust motes dancing in the still air. I fumbled with the latch, my fingers trembling, but it wouldn't budge, nailed shut, of course. Panic welled up again, threatening to consume me. I was trapped in this house of horrors, a labyrinth designed to confine its prey. But giving up wasn't an option, not while there was still a flicker of fight left in me. Turning from the useless window, I scanned the room, my eyes darting from one shadowed corner to the next. The darkness seemed to close in, suffocating and oppressive. There had to be another way out, a hidden passage, a secret door, anything that could offer a glimmer of hope. A floorboard creaked behind me, breaking the silence. I whirled around, my heart leaping into my throat, fear gripping me tightly. Standing in the doorway, framed by the flickering light from the hallway, was Sarah's father, his presence menacing. A cruel smile played on his lips, his eyes gleaming with a predatory hunger that mirrored his daughter's. It was a look that promised no mercy. "Running out of steam, are we?" he asked, his voice a low growl that reverberated through the room, sending chills down my spine. He took a step closer, his shadow stretching across the floor like a living thing creeping towards me. "It's no use running," he continued, his voice laced with a chilling amusement that made my blood run cold. "You're already part of the family," he declared, his words echoing in the room. His words sent a shiver down my spine, a cold realization settling in. He was right. I was already part of their twisted family, whether I liked it or not. The walls seemed to close in on me, but I wasn't ready to be the main course. I had to find a way to fight back, to escape this nightmare. Fear, primal and all-consuming, threatened to paralyze me, but something deep within me, a spark of defiance, refused to be extinguished. I lunged for a heavy bookend, its brass gleaming under the dim light. "Stay back!" I shouted, my voice hoarse with terror and adrenaline. Sarah's father paused, his smile widening. He wasn't afraid, not in the slightest. He saw my fear, my desperation, and it fueled his amusement. "You think you can stop us?" he chuckled, shaking his head slowly. "You're nothing but prey, and tonight we feast." He advanced, his movements slow, deliberate, like a predator toying with its prey. The bookend felt heavy in my hand, a meager weapon against the menace radiating from him, but it was something, a shield against the inevitable. "You were warned," he said, his voice low, guttural. "Sarah tried to tell you, but you wouldn't listen." He shook his head, a grotesque parody of sadness twisting his features. "Now it's too late." The fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows that stretched and contorted, mirroring the dread twisting in my gut. The scent of old books and wood smoke was overpowered by the metallic tang of blood, a constant reminder of the horror that awaited me. He lunged. I swung the bookend with all my might, a desperate prayer escaping my lips. The heavy brass connected with his shoulder, a sickening thud echoing in the sudden silence. He staggered back, a grunt escaping his lips, but he didn't fall. Surprise flickered across his face, quickly replaced by a cold fury that chilled me to the bone. He clutched his shoulder, his fingers stained crimson, my blood. But the wound, though deep, wasn't enough. It wouldn't stop him, not for long. I didn't hesitate. This was my chance, my one shot at escape. Turning from the momentarily stunned figure, I bolted towards the hallway, adrenaline propelling me forward. I didn't know where I was going, but any direction was better than facing the horrors that awaited me in that room. The hallway stretched before me, a seemingly endless tunnel illuminated by flickering gaslight. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps heavy, determined. But I couldn't give up, not now, not when freedom, however elusive, beckoned. I burst through a set of double doors, stumbling into a grand dining room, my heart pounding in my chest. The long mahogany table was set for a feast, the silverware gleaming under the light of a crystal chandelier, casting intricate patterns on the walls. But the aroma that filled the air wasn't of roasted turkey or pumpkin pie, as one might expect in such a setting. It was the metallic scent of blood, heavy, cloying, suffocating, making it hard to breathe. And at the head of the table, a figure sat shrouded in shadow, an ominous presence that sent chills down my spine. A figure I knew all too well, Sarah. Her presence was unmistakable. She rose as I entered, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her lips, her eyes glinting with a sinister light. In her hands she held a silver platter polished to a mirror-like shine. On it, nestled amongst the white linen, lay a human heart. My heart. The sight was both surreal and horrifying. "Welcome home, darling," she said, her voice a chilling whisper that echoed in the vast emptiness of the room. "Dinner is served." The last thing I saw, before darkness swallowed me whole, was the flicker of triumph in her eyes, a look of victory that haunted me. The hunter had caught her prey and there was no escape. And tonight the feast would be mine, a dark and twisted celebration of her triumph.
The clock ticked past midnight. Each second resonated like a hammer blow in the stillness of the house. I sat alone, the dim glow of the television screen washing over my face in icy waves. Shadows danced at the edges of the room, twisting familiar shapes into menacing phantoms. I told myself it was just the wind, rustling the old oak tree outside the window. But my heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat urging me to stay alert. The parents were late. Their laughter, usually echoing through the house upon their return, was noticeably absent. 11:47 p.m., almost midnight. The minutes seemed to crawl, each second stretching into an eternity. I tried to lose myself in the mindless scrolling, to distract myself from the gnawing anxiety in the pit of my stomach. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, anything to keep my mind occupied. Anything to drown out the silence, to ignore the prickling sensation on the back of my neck that whispered of unseen eyes. Anything to feel less alone in the darkness. The sudden tap at the door shattered the fragile peace. It was soft, almost hesitant, but it sliced through the silence like a razor. My blood ran cold. I froze, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. The kids. I had to keep the kids safe. I told myself it was nothing, just the wind, a stray animal, anything but what my gut told me it was. But the soft knock came again, and then again. Each one more insistent than the last. This was no accident. Someone was outside, watching, waiting. Trembling, I crept towards the front door. My hand reached for the cold steel of the deadbolt, a flimsy barrier between me and whatever lurked on the other side. "Don't answer it," a voice whispered in my head. But curiosity, that insidious beast, gnawed at my resolve. I had to see. I had to know. Taking a deep breath, I peered through the peephole. The world outside seemed to hold its breath. The street lamp flickered, casting elongated shadows across the lawn. And then I saw him, standing motionless on the porch, his face obscured by the darkness of the hood. A shiver ran down my spine. Who was he? What did he want? My phone buzzed in my hand, the sudden noise making me jump. An unknown number flashed across the screen. My finger hovered over the notification, a strange mix of dread and morbid curiosity washing over me. What if it was the parents? What if something was wrong? Swallowing my fear, I opened the message. 3 words, cold and sharp like shards of ice, pierced through my heart. I see you. A scream caught in my throat, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. He knew I was watching. He knew I was alone. And then, a sound from behind me, a soft creak. The closet door inched open, plunging me into an abyss of terror. The closet door swung open, revealing an abyss of inky blackness. My blood ran cold, my mind struggling to process the impossible. There was someone, something, inside the house. The phone slipped from my grasp, clattering against the wooden floor with a sickening thud. I was trapped, caught between the unknown terror behind me and the sinister figure lurking outside. Each breath I took felt like a victory, a desperate defiance against the encroaching darkness. My senses went into overdrive. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of fabric, amplified 1,000-fold in the silence. My eyes darted from the closet to the front door, my mind a whirlwind of terrifying possibilities. A soft, guttural whisper emanated from the closet, sending chills down my spine. It wasn't a language I recognized, but the malevolence in its tone was unmistakable. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat urging me to flee. But where could I go? The figure outside remained motionless, a silent sentinel bathed in the eerie glow of the porch light. He was waiting for me, waiting for the moment I would crack, the moment my fear would drive me into his grasp. A wave of dizziness washed over me, my legs turning to jelly beneath me. I stumbled back, my hand desperately searching for something, anything, to steady myself. The room spun, the shadows on the wall contorting into grotesque shapes. The whispers from the closet grew louder, more insistent, as if urging the figure outside to move. My back hit the wall, the impact jolting me back to reality. There was nowhere left to run, no escape. The end was coming, and it was coming for me. Adrenaline surged through my veins, momentarily eclipsing the paralyzing fear. I couldn't just surrender, I had to fight. My eyes darted around the room, searching for a weapon, a shield, anything to defend myself. A heavy ceramic lamp stood on the side table, its shade askew. It was a poor substitute for a weapon, but it was all I had. I lunged for the lamp, my fingers wrapping around its smooth, cold surface. The whispering from the closet intensified, morphing into a guttural growl that sent shivers down my spine. It was too late. He was coming. The shadow from the closet stretched towards me, long and menacing, as the figure outside began to move. The first blow caught me off guard, sending the lamp flying from my grasp. I crumpled to the floor, pain exploding in my side. I tasted blood, metallic and warm on my tongue. My attacker was a blur of motion, a whirlwind of rage and violence. I kicked and scratched, but my struggles were met with brutal efficiency. Each blow was a hammer blow, driving the air from my lungs, stealing my breath, my strength. My vision swam, the edges of the room blurring in and out of focus. The metallic scent of blood filled the air, thick and cloying, a horrifying premonition of what was to come. A scream ripped through the night, a desperate plea for help that would never be answered. I didn't recognize the sound, high-pitched and raw, but it jolted me back to the present. The kids, they were awake. They had heard everything. Panic surged through me, a tidal wave of fear and desperation. I had to protect them, but I was trapped, pinned beneath the weight of my attacker, my body screaming in protest. Each breath was a struggle, each movement a monumental effort. My attacker leaned close, his hot, fetid breath on my cheek. His voice, a low, guttural growl, sent chills down my spine. "Quiet now," he hissed, his words thick with menace. "It will be over soon." I closed my eyes, tears streaming down my face. This was it. This was the end. But even in the face of my own mortality, my thoughts were with the children. They were alone, defenseless. The nightmare wasn't over. It was just beginning. The pressure on my chest intensified, stealing the air from my lungs. Each breath became a desperate struggle, a fight against the suffocating darkness that surrounded me. My attacker's face, a grotesque mask of rage and triumph, swam into view. His features twisted and distorted, a nightmarish vision that seemed to revel in my suffering. His eyes, cold and lifeless, stared down at me, devoid of any emotion, any semblance of humanity. They were the eyes of a predator, unfeeling and merciless. The world around me, the overturned furniture, the blood splattered across the floor, faded to a dull roar as darkness crept in from the edges of my vision. The chaos of the room mirrored the turmoil within me. I tried to scream, to cry out for help, but no sound escaped my lips. My voice was trapped, swallowed by the oppressive silence that filled the room. My body, battered and broken, refused to obey my commands. Every attempt to move was met with searing pain, a reminder of my helplessness. It was as if I were trapped inside my own personal nightmare, a silent observer to my own demise. Fear gripped me, paralyzing my every thought and action. And then, as my vision began to tunnel, I saw it. The edges of my sight darkened, closing in like a vice. A flicker of movement in the hallway, just beyond the attacker's shoulder. A glimmer of hope, or perhaps another threat, lurking in the shadows. The figure stood bathed in the pale glow of the nightlight, its features obscured by the darkness. But even from this distance, I could sense its malevolence, its cold, predatory hunger. It was taller than a child, more imposing. My heart, already pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, stuttered in my chest. It was him, the figure from the closet. He moved with an unnatural grace, gliding across the floor like a phantom, his eyes never leaving my attacker. For a moment, our gazes met, and a cold shiver ran down my spine. In that instant, I knew. This wasn't a rescue. It was simply a changing of the guard. My attacker must have sensed the shift, the arrival of something sinister, for he turned, his head snapping up to face the hallway. A look of surprise, quickly replaced by a primal fear, crossed his features. He scrambled back, pushing himself away from me, his eyes wide with terror. But it was too late. The figure lunged, a blur of motion too swift for the human eye to follow. There was a sickening thud, A choked gasp, and then silence, the heavy silence of death. My attacker lay motionless on the floor, his eyes staring vacantly at the ceiling, his blood pooling around him like a macabre halo. The camera flickered, its lens spattered with something dark and viscous. It was as if the very essence of the room's dread had materialized on the lens, obscuring the view and adding to the growing sense of unease. Static hissed from the television screen, the only sound in the now deathly quiet house. The silence was oppressive, wrapping around the walls like a suffocating blanket, making every creak and groan of the old house seem amplified. The figure stood over its handiwork, its silhouette stark against the pale moonlight filtering through the window. It was a haunting image, the kind that etches itself into the mind, refusing to be forgotten. Then, slowly, deliberately, it turned its head towards the camera. The movement was almost mechanical, devoid of any human warmth or emotion, sending chills down the spine of anyone who might be watching. Although its features remained shrouded in shadow, the malevolent glint in its eye spoke volumes. It was finished here. The sense of finality was palpable, as if the air itself had grown heavier with the weight of its dark deeds. But the night was young. The darkness outside seemed to stretch on forever, an endless canvas for the horrors yet to unfold. And there were still two innocent souls, sleeping peacefully upstairs, oblivious to the horrors that awaited them. Their dreams were untouched by the malevolence lurking just below, a fragile piece that would soon be shattered. The laughter, once a source of joy and comfort, now seemed chillingly out of place, a cruel reminder of the innocence that was about to be extinguished. It echoed through the empty halls, a haunting prelude to the impending doom. The camera finally succumbed to the darkness, leaving the viewer with a lingering sense of dread and the unspoken certainty that some nightmares, once started, never truly end. The screen went black, but the terror it captured would linger in the minds of those who witnessed it,